I accept that. My concern is that the way in which education systems have been secularized in the Muslim world over the last 50 or 100 years, by more or less deliberately suppressing sort of a deep spirituality and more or less deliberately suppressing a real sort of philosophical theology, has left young Muslims without adequate resources to deal with the challenges of modernity. If the modern world takes itself to be about science, regarding material reality as the ultimate ground of meaning, consciousness is essentially an aspect of brain function, and makes these very grave challenges to the premises of the religion, it's a disaster if the Islamic curriculum in the madrasas, let alone public secular schools, doesn't equip them with some kind of philosophical training to enable them to respond to those things. I've just come from Saudi Arabia, where the young people are kind of often completely disillusioned with religion and kind of actively atheistic now. And the reason is not because they've really come up with good arguments, but because nobody's given them even the basis of a kind of Islamic theological refutation of secularity. It's not very difficult to do, but there is no context in the school system for anything that resembles kalam or theology, because everything is kitab or sunnah, kitab or sunnah, kitab or sunnah. They've moved from the aql entirely to the naql, at a time when everywhere else in the world is moving to the aql, and that leaves them kind of naked and without armor and without protection. So the first time they go on YouTube and they see some atheist Tunisian talking about something, they're kind of shattered. So they haven't been given that protection. So I'm not suggesting we should revive, again, the sort of Mamluk or Ottoman styles, but the way in which secularity has impinged on and impoverished Muslim education, even in ostensibly religious colleges and universities, has meant that there aren't very many young people who really are properly philosophically aware of how to deal with these challenges, most of which are not new. The arguments against religion, they go back to the time of sort of Heraclitus and ancient Greek thinkers, and you can find responses to them in the Kalam text. If we're sending young people out into the world without that training, then it's like throwing a cat, like throwing pigeons amongst cats, if you like. They're just vulnerable, and they're being gobbled up by missionaries, by atheists, by people of every persuasion, because we've lost the capacity to use a beautiful and Quranically obedient style of philosophical reflection, and it's a real shame. That reminds us that it's not actually primarily about curricula, although they're often very inadequate, but about the teachers. What I remember from my now very distant sort of school years is not really the curriculum, that's all a blur, but I do remember quite clearly some of the teachers and things that I learnt from them, and things I didn't like and things I did like, things that could inspire me. So even if you have a modern secular nation-state education ministry model where the curriculum is kind of a poor, pathetic imitation of something that happened in the West 50, 60 years ago, you can still create a great classroom environment if the teacher is inspirational and a great personality and tells the kids stories. And in the kind of privacy of the classroom, as it were, all kinds of things can be told to kids, and they can be given not sort of direct preaching, which usually doesn't work, but kind of hikmah and stories and anecdotes, and well, what do you think of this, and why don't we do that, and is it time for prayer, and that sort of thing. And a kind of even one or two inspirational, Islamically aware teachers in a school can produce a whole crop of really great Muslim kids from that school. And similarly, the curriculum can be wonderful, but if the teachers are kind of deadbeat and just interested in what they're going to do at the weekends, the curriculum isn't going to catch fire. So I value this point. It all depends on the educator, and people who go into school teaching are fulfilling an enormously important, pivotal, and inshallah rewarded role in securing the sort of inspiration and the perpetuation of Islam in new generations. And it's really hard work. It's exhausting and soul-destroying, and kids are a problem and becoming more problematic, and the work is excessive. But it's a great risala, it's a great vocation. Probably school teachers have a far greater impact on society than, say, old guys giving khutbahs in mosques occasionally. I think that's the reality. So we should valorize them and give them a way of seeing their vocation as being something that's sacred, a very exalted calling.